Hello, everyone. My name is Ken. I'd like to welcome all of you to this edition of the Two World Podcast. It is, for many of us and many of you, the holiday season, and we wish you well during this time. Today, we are going to delve into another episode of a favorite program of ours called Northern Exposure that aired back in the 90s. And today, we're going to explore an episode that's a little bit different than some of the others. I want to, as always, welcome our two co hosts of the Two World podcast. First, we have,
Hi, everybody. I'm Jacob.
thank you, Jacob, and we also have,
I am Barney.
all right. So we hope you will enjoy our meanderings of thought and welcome again to all of you.
Wanted to do this episode. It's one of my favorites, and I don't know that it's necessarily associated with such. I guess it isn't, but I hope that we could squeeze this episode in before the end of this year 2023, because I don't know the kind of the festiveness of it and the kind of also the slight formality, the formalness of the big feast that we're having in this show made me think of a little bit of New Year's parties, New Year's Eve parties. So that's kind of why I thought that maybe maybe we've covered enough other characters to understand kind of the motivations of each character, is kind of a little bit of their personality, to get a little bit more out of the episode. And also, I thought it was kind of fun, if possible, to squeeze it in, thinking of parties and thinking of New Year's Eve. But that was one of the things I thought for why doing this episode now in this order. But yeah, like I said, it's one of my personal favorites, and I'm just curious how you've react. Either of you have reacted to the show and the episode, and um, what maybe parts that you liked, or maybe could have done without throughout the episode.
You know, that now that you've mentioned kind of squeezing it in as such for 2023 and New Year's and so on, I for our viewers, it's all about the big feast. I know that some parties you and I have been to, there's something else maybe going on. Maybe there's games off to the side, maybe, but this is all about the feast and all about Maurice providing the feast. And I'm sure we can agree that Maurice's character is being explored pretty extensively in this episode.
Yeah, when I saw the title of the episode before even watching it, I wondered if it would have any overtones with some other movies or shows that I've seen centered around feasts, like the really well-known Babette's Feast. I don't know if either of you have seen that, but basically, the story of that is of a really talented chef who world almost like world renowned, who moves to a small unassuming town where the folks there have a very austere lifestyle, and they have almost a kind of a reformed slash like puritanical approach to like comfort. Like they think, oh, we don't have fine foods, we don't have fine clothes, like life should be simple, we should work hard, and she is embraced by the town and appreciates that, and she is going to move away. But before she does, she wants to show her gratitude for how they welcomed her in, even though she was an outsider. So she makes this great feast for them. And it's just incredible how they don't even know how to process it. Like, you could see when they take the bites of the first course it's served, like all that's going on in their mind by the facial expressions in their eyes. But in their worldview, they don't draw attention to that. So they don't know what to say. Like, but anyway, I was like, will this kind of delve into that territory? And it has some overlap. And so I was like really happy to see people reacting to the extravagance that Maurice has when he puts this together, and all of the unique foods and drinks that he selected, and the presentation. It seems like it is over the top, and for the residents of Sicily completely out of their normal frame of reference, kind of like that little town in the Babette's Feast movie. So it's like not quite that extreme, but there are some similarities. So, had either of you ever heard of that before? That other?
Have heard of it, Jacob, and I think I saw it, viewed it. I don't remember these things quite as well as my wife does, but yeah, I could see the overlap from your description. Was there a feeling of and I'm referencing Ruth Ann talking to Joel in her store, where we are the serfs, and Maurice is the lord of the manor, and he's going to provide this for us. And was there that feeling in the Babette, or was it
I think
more
that would be a difference because I think, you know, the host in Babette's Feast really is doing it out of sense of service, not of
okay?
self-service, but out of like genuine wanting to bless and do something extravagant for the townsfolk. So yeah, Maurice in this case, yeah, has another layer of self-interest going on there that I didn't sense in the Babette's Feast. Yes. Um, so it is interesting though. Babette's Feast has one character who happens to be visiting the town when she puts on the feast, and he eats at the table with the people, and he understands what kind of food it is because he's actually eaten at the restaurant, this world-renowned restaurant that this chef has worked at before. And so he keeps raving about the food. Like, do you understand? And the people are like, they've kind of made a pact before going to the meal that they're not going to say anything about the food, that they're just going to, enjoy it and be simple and humble about it. So they're not saying much. They're like talking about the weather. And he's like, do you realize this incredible? And he's describing the food to them. And it reminds me of elements of this episode where there are experts at the table, connoisseurs of the food and the wine, and they're describing it as Maurice's feast is going on. And so it is kind of interesting when you have those types of individuals at a big feast, because they kind of give commentary for everybody else about, oh, the quality of this flavor profile and how it relates to the taste, the earthiness of that wine, or so but maybe we'll get into this a little bit today. But as we talk about Adam, the character Adam, and also the character Eve. But it's fascinating how there are experts in this episode, but one of the subplots is about them being fooled about something. The experts think, they're drinking a certain type of wine, and we'll find out that there's actually something very different going on. So it'll be interesting to talk about that
Right.
today. So do you have any thoughts
Quick
about?
question.
Yes.
Quick question for the two of you. Did I hear this right? As various characters were discussing going to the big feast, did Ed say, "I get to sit at the big table this year"? Did I get that? Where else would he have been?
I know.
I saw there was an odd line thrown in.
As
Did I hear
as
that
I
right?
You did, yeah. And as I was
Okay.
thinking, watching the episode again, and then thinking about it again, and then especially seeing the last scene, like you said, I think maybe that was just put a line put in there to be funny, because you're right. Where else are are they really inviting kids to this? Had they ever invited kids to this? And I really doubt it. And so I think that was just put in there for jokes. But that in that same scene is kind of like what Jacob was saying, that they are remembering the past big parties that Maurice have thrown. And Holling, who just runs kind of a normal diner within his bar, serves just kind of, typical diner food. He can pontificate, he can explain quite well about the different food that he really enjoyed. And then also, Jacob, one of your comments made me think of also of Ruth Ann, which Ken, touched on too, and how she goes on and on and on about caviar and about this and about that and about all these other things that they have. But she immediately contradicts herself, as in, so saying, um, Joel thinking maybe she won't go, and she said, "Are you kidding me? It's caviar." And of course, she's going to go for all of the things that she doesn't like about it. So she says, she wouldn't miss it for the world. And then I I love how at the feast we see that she really, really enjoys this as she's grabbing this hors d'oeuvre and that hors d'oeuvre and eats as much of everything that she can. And so I wonder, maybe we'll get into this later. I wonder what kind of commentary that says about her, about us humans, about um, the notion of, there's no such thing as a free lunch, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, things like that. I wonder, um, talk about this later for sure, when we unpack the episode more, but I wonder if if she is put in there as a commentary about us in American lifestyle, American culture and whatnot.
Hmm. That's interesting. So would you say you have this range of responses leading up to the feast and during the feast to it, like the extravagance of the food and the displays and the drinks and even the invitations, how they have calligraphy and the actual paper that they're printed on, it almost feels like cloth, and all of these like details that Maurice has really been intentional about. So would you say on the whole that it feels like most characters encounter this whole thing just really as an exciting celebration? I mean, for the most part, they're looking forward to going, and um, is that the impression you both have, that in the town it's actually quite popular, even though it's a little bit over the top and it is all about Maurice? The town, in the end, all the people who go end up kind of enjoying it, would you say, or generally?
Well, I think they certainly are enjoying it. Those that are invited,
Ah,
um, there's certainly a select group. They could have staged it with several tables and having many other people there, but this is still a select group, and you wonder if it's us thinking about going to this feast and being invited and knowing that you're in a select group. Does this sounds like an American cultural thing? How would we react to being invited, knowing that it's a select group?
hmm. And that maybe also gets us to the early part of the episode with Joel's situation, and maybe we can
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that.
Mhm.
A misunderstanding, but certainly a situation where he felt excluded. So um, maybe for our audience, would you be one to just give a little bit of context for that, Barney, for what Joel is facing?
Yeah, the very start of the episode, Joel notices this invitation that Marilyn is looking at, and has gold leaf, and like you said, it's just incredibly um, ornate and just stunning. The invitation itself, and yeah, sadly, Joel gets around to it and looks through the pile of mail, and Marilyn knows what he's thinking, and she says it's not there, and then he and then he comes to his kind of go-to line that I think he uses in other episodes, where he says, "I'll be in my office," and um, yeah, just the agony that we see him go through. And of course we kind of in the episodes we've seen already, we kind of have the notion, the feeling that he's somewhat immature person, and he probably thinks highly of himself, and he has a lot of disdain for this community that he's in. And by season 4, I guess, he hasn't the passage of time is hard to gauge here in the season 4 that we're in, but it's less than 2 years, I think. But he still hasn't really acclimated. He still really hasn't felt like, I think he has intentionally kept his distance from the other townspeople, the other citizens of Sicily. And so here he even mentions later, this is the one thing that he's ever wanted to do. And it kind of is like, well, it kind of serves you right, for the way you've behaved. We don't know that he gets invited right away. and then he chalks it up to, well, maybe he thinks that Maurice found out. And then again, he tries to pin this on Ruth or on Marilyn. you know, Maybe he thinks that Maurice has found out that Joel was, heaven forbid, honest to the IRS when they asked him if they've ever seen Maurice plow streets with his Suburban, with his big truck with a snowplow on it. And he said no. And he thinks that's the only reason it's the only reason, he can possibly come up with this in mind as to why he wasn't invited. And I love Marilyn's response where she just finishes her milkshake and we get this loud slurping of the straw noise in response to Joel. And we see him go. He really genuinely has hurt feelings. And when he is very accusatory toward when he finds out, when he has a little tantrum, when Maurice asks him for incidentals, for some, ace bandage and some iodine and, band-aids and whatnot. And Joel finds out that he was invited, then he can't leave well enough alone. And he storms over to the person who delivers the mail, who picks up the mail and delivers the mail, which isn't Ruth Ann, but a person who he is mostly indifferent toward anyway, Maggie. And he just lays into her uninvited into her home. But the one thing that he chews her out, but the one thing that of amidst all of this that I find so interesting is that he is self-aware enough to point out to her, you know that I have abandonment issues. And I don't know if he's thinking, why, I don't know that if he's going toward the expected response or the subtext of why would you do this because I have abandonment issues, or is he thinking, that I have abandonment issues, so of course you would find the one thing that would drive me crazy and do this to me. But and then to go on a little bit further, at the actual feast, what was that? That wasn't an apology. What was that he said to Maggie? It was the furthest thing you could get from an apology possible, but somehow trying to mend fences. And I don't even know what to make of that, what he said to her. He was still, this was one of the things that got me thinking about the issue of pride that we have, pride and all pride versus confidence that we have in this episode. He is, I don't know, trying to save face or trying to put himself, kind of like make himself look important without trying to tell her that he's important. But, the way that he broached the topic of apologizing her in a way for storming in and being accusatory of her, but absolutely not being apologetic in the words that he said, but somehow she accepted what he said. I couldn't quite wrap my mind around it, even after I've seen the episode so many times. And that leaves me with a little bit of a sour feeling, the way that he couldn't, amidst the beauty of the feast and the music and the food and the drinks and whatnot, and everyone looking nice, that the best that he can come up with is that kind of half-hearted, almost attempt at an apology. And that I wish that they would have let him take a little time off for this feast that he wanted to go to so badly and be nice for once.
It's interesting. It's so fascinating. I don't know if I was tired when I watched this or wasn't engaged fully, but for some reason I felt like his apology surprised her because she is so used to him having like a pointed kind of final word, getting a final word in edgewise, or and when he apologizes, it kind of disarms her because she is not expecting it, because he says, if I'm remembering correctly, something along the lines of like, it's really none of my business, even if you, it doesn't matter how you didn't get the invitation to me, whether by intent or non-intent. It's really none of my business make comments about your personal life or how you might feel or not feel for me. And I don't know, I felt like that disarmed her, because she's thought like, oh, how out of character for Joel to say something. He's actually, those are kind of somewhat humble words to say. So like maybe he could have gone further, but I thought, like, to me, like, maybe because I don't know his character as well as you, but I thought it was a little bit, it was like an olive branch. Like he was trying um to say sorry, but yeah, he probably could have used better words. But how did you perceive that, Ken?
Well, looking from Maggie's standpoint, I really felt like um, in her mind, she's thinking, well, this is a party, and I'm not going to this one time challenge Joel on this point. This is as good as it's going to get, and I know it from Joel.
Hmm.
So therefore, I will let this slide because it's the big feast. You
Hmm.
know, yes, he could have done so much better. I think now looking at it from Joel's standpoint, he was so wrong about so many things in this process, um, that I think as far as Barney referenced his level of maturity, maybe this is as good as he could do given the wrongness of, and he even, and you hit some key points with Joel, and another moment during the this edition of the show where he started describing, well, I've been to some parties in New York,
Oh
and let me
yeah.
tell you about those. Another defensive mechanism to, and I got to admit, guys, I could have been that if I was in Joel's position at his age. I think that would have been one technique I would have employed to somehow rationalize in my mind that I'm not part of this major occasion,
Hmm.
but I've had others. I don't know how I would have, you know, delved into it, but I saw myself there a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, now, hearing what both of you said, maybe I'm thinking maybe I was a bit unkind because I think maybe Joel was trying to be genuine in his apology, but he just doesn't have the means to be it. And I think what he tried to say was, even though I mean to go as far as to bring up, I don't know if what you were doing was intentional or not, I still forgive you, like that. I don't know if you were purposefully being a bad person, but I
Yeah,
still,
and I
I
still
still
maybe sort of
forgive
think
you.
so.
Right. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
But but
interesting.
Ken, you bring up, I think this is a great segue for the one question that you wrote about and that I thought about. I was thinking about too. How would we respond if we were in Joel's shoes? And you also bring up a great point. We have to think back to ourselves, not the age that we are now, but how were we, 26, 27, 28, 29 years old? Would we have processed dealing with this major rejection? Either of you want to go first?
I have a story that it's a much smaller scale example.
Hmm.
Um, Several years ago, there was a family that came back into town who had been a part of our church for a number of years and then moved away. And they sent out a message on Facebook to a lot of the people in our church that they had known when they were here, saying, we'd like to get together with all of you when we're back, just to catch up and maybe enjoy some food and fellowship and be together. But I was not included on that list of people. And
Wow.
this family's coming back into town to visit, and I said, they are, and they said, oh yeah, didn't you get the Facebook message? And they showed me theirs. It was just like Marilyn with the invitation. And I was like, oh, and they're like, well, surely they would have wanted to include you. And I would think so, but don't want to presume. And then that person who I was talking with reached out to them on Facebook, and they're like, did you mean to like also include Jacob in the group? And they're like, oh yes, yes, I'm so sorry, I didn't like just overlook, like when I was typing quickly, it just did. And it's because so the other person checked in for me. But in the meantime, before they got back to me, I was like feeling down. I was like, I wonder if I've done something to, have yeah, displease them, or but no, in that case it was just an oversight. But and that was a much smaller scale thing. It was just a get together. But I felt down, and I was questioning myself, like, could I have
Mhm.
done something to upset them? But so I think it's a natural um feeling to, when you're excluded, to question, to like, why wasn't I invited, and did I do something to the person? And yeah, sometimes in life it is just a misunderstanding. It's a lot harder if you find out that you were purposefully excluded. I don't, fortunately, I don't have any stories about that to share today, but yeah, the one that I do have helps me see a little bit of Joel's struggle. So, how
Sure,
about for you,
sure.
Ken?
Um, well, number one, I would have never gone to Maurice directly. I don't think I would have that in me to do. And neither did Joel in a way, because it was a sort of inadvertent meeting in his office. Um, Thinking back to those ages, I think I might have gone one of two ways. I might have possibly just in my mind said, well, it's not my party. And the person that's in charge of this party certainly can invite whoever they want and not invite whoever they want. Um, Although I may have gone to a person, a friend who I know was invited, and said, would you mind perhaps asking the Maurice person um, if I was omitted, and if I was omitted purposefully, that's fine too. I'm just curious because I think maybe there was a mistake. It would certainly affect me. That's for sure. If those around me were going to be part of a big deal.
How about for you,
Yeah,
Barney?
that's yeah. Um, I I'm trying to put myself back in those in my that age, and I think that yeah, part of me would maybe I think after I'm thinking of another episode where Maggie and Joel have been having arguments, and Maggie says, Joel's response to everything is being angry. And something happens, Joel gets angry. Something happens, Joel gets angry. Something happens, Joel gets angry. I probably would have reacted with a little bit of anger too. But I think I would have
Mm.
not outwardly, but inwardly, why not me? And I think I would have tried to avoid, hearing poor Joel when he orders a moose burger and then everyone starts talking about that. I think I would have probably just had to take my burger to go at time. I don't think I would have wanted to hear anything about that. But I think thankfully there's a little bit of um lead up to the party. And I think with a little day or two to get over it and some clarity, I probably would have thought, you know, here, and then Jacob, you haven't seen this episode, but here, Maurice and I, we had one venture together where we tried to have a golf course and, you know, how we've done things together. And then maybe in the back of my mind, I would have thought, all these people around me that have been invited are in my circle too. I wonder if maybe I was invited. And boy, I would hate to find out that I was invited and didn't go. And so I think maybe like Ken said, I would definitely have tried to have someone, or find a way to bring it up, if I ran into Maurice by chance, or have someone please find out if maybe I was invited to and call me.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when you were talking about um, anger as a response that Joel commonly has, I don't know if any of you have heard this before, but they say that anger can be a blanket emotion, that it can be something that covers over a lot of deeper internal other struggles and emotions. And so maybe that's the first visible thing that he displays, but there's most likely psychologically a lot more going on under the surface, if he feels rejected and hurt or abandoned, as he said. And um, all of us, as in our stories in our own way, I think, can kind of relate. If we had been excluded from a party, it could be tempting to feel that way. Yeah. Well, what did you think of the way that so Joel has the role at the beginning of the one who's questioning and feels excluded, but then he is kind of also throughout the episode one of the we talked about the connoisseurs or the people who know about the quality of the wine and the food because at different times Shelley, maybe if we translate or transition a little bit to Shelley's part of the story, something happens to this bottle of wine when Shelley's looking at it and um am I saying her name wrong? Sheila.
Oh yeah, Shelley's right.
Shelley, yeah.
Shelley,
Yes.
Shelley.
And and then she's really anxious about it. And so maybe we can let their audience know about this. But I know at one point, I think she asked Joel, how much would such a bottle of wine cost? Because she's trying to, solve this problem. And he's in my favorite scene, and I hope we can talk about it a little bit. In the whole episode is later when Joel and Adam and Maurice are walking in the wine cellar. For some reason, I just love listening to them talk about the wines, the different vintages and years, and sharing stories about wines that they've had. I don't know. I just love that moment in the episode because they really know their stuff. And it's three, it could be any field. I just love sometimes to hear knowledgeable people bouncing ideas off of each other and the nuances that they have. Even if I don't understand it, it's kind of intriguing. So I feel like Joel is one of those people. But maybe we should transition into what happened with Shelley. I don't know. Ken, would you want to explain the context for
Sure.
what happened?
Sure. As expected with the big feast and Maurice, the finest of everything, the finest caviar, the finest beef, the finest everything, and that included the wine list. And he ordered a 1929 bottle of Chateau Latour, and Shelley was handling it as Maggie was unloading her truck with some of the other items for the party, and she bumped it against the truck, and the bottom of the bottle broke off, and the wine exited the bottle. And as Shelley becomes more knowledgeable about just how expensive this is, asking Joel and so on, she is, as expected, in a complete panic, which really helped us to be introduced then to the character Adam's wife, Eve. Up until this point, Eve had periodically appeared a little bit, and we now learn they've had a child, and suddenly there's a companionship formed with Shelley and Eve. We can take off from there a little bit.
Yeah, I also liked how yeah, how we saw Joel's reaction to Shelley when he's, ooh, 29 Latour. Oh, that's up there. That would be up there. Yeah. Like he is incredibly impressed by just the mentioning of that, not knowing that that would be, as Maurice said, the pride of his cellar. And yeah, I also thought that scene too, when the three of them are chatting and, unexpectedly, we don't know, we wouldn't expect it, but Adam really is very knowledgeable and, wow, he's been to this person's wine tasting and that person's wine tasting. And, we see that maybe what Adam told us at the very first episode, that he's a good chef, maybe he really, really, really is. That's one thing he's not lying about, that when it comes to food, he knows what he's doing. And we see that in this episode. But and then Jacob, you haven't seen the first episode with Eve, which is also a great one for Adam and Eve together. And she's a hypochondriac, as we found out in that one, and we kind of see bits and pieces of that when she is very particular about who can handle the baby and how. But yeah, then when we see here that Eve too is an expert, and we find out much later that I think it's later, maybe in the next season, or it might even be the same season, that she was born into money as well, and that's how she has this knowledge. And it's interesting that we find out that she is exactly the person for the job. Her reaction is also great too, where she goes, Oh, geez, at 29 Latour, you know,
Yeah.
um, but we've seen that she has um, been able to fool Adam before with these, kind of copycat, um, copycat dill dill dressing lawn clippings for dill dressing, or Laphroaig Scotch. What was it, like 80 years something that has been aged, and she's been able to pull a fast one on Adam, which she says, and how fine tuned, how acute astute his palate is. And so, boy, like you say, Ken, if there were ever the person to go to help get this, pull this off, maybe, then Eve is the woman to ask. And I think she relishes. Also, thinking back to the idea of pride versus confidence, she oozes. She really relishes this challenge. And boy, when it comes to the end of the episode, what's going to happen?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She relished it, but the scene at the table when it's time for the tasting, she was nervous, certainly, because she pulled it off once before, but this is a Chateau Latour 1929. Well done by the preparers of this program. Wow.
I thought it was really interesting too that as she's making this fake wine to fill the bottle that Shelley's accidentally cracked, she's describing to Shelley why she's putting in what she's putting in. Like she says, "Well, this will give it the earthy taste, and this will give it the," and she goes through this litany of things that are qualities of this type of wine, and then at the tasting, it felt like Adam was saying a lot of the same things. As he was drinking, he said, "Oh, it has this earthiness, and it has that," and he goes through all the things that she listed. So she knew the main qualities that I identified it and was able to emulate them with this concoction. And it's funny too. I had mentioned my favorite scene is when they're in the cellar, and Shelley is in the cellar too, hiding because as they're going through talking, she was trying to sneak in and put this bottle of wine back that she and Eve have put back together and super glued and put the concoction in. And so she's hiding when they come in, and she comes back and um, is it Holling? Sees her, he's like, Shelley, what's going on? And she has like cobwebs on her hair or
Yeah.
something. Was like, where have you been? Yeah, but they pull it off, which is incredible. Like that Eve is that skilled, and because the whole episode, Adam is so particular. Like he's, lecturing the kitchen staff about the fine nuances of things have to be warm. They can't be hot or cold. You don't want them, to I forget what the term is, but basically there's just the right temperature that these things are to be kept, and all these nuances. But then Eve is able to trick even him into thinking that this concoction is the authentic wine. So yeah.
Good point.
So Barney had written this question before the episode, and I guess I'm kind of wondering too, would you want to attend this event if you were imagine yourself as a resident of Sicily? Would you, if you got the invitation, would you want to go?
Yeah, this was,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Barney.
Yeah, I was going to say this was one of Ken's very, very interesting questions. And
Oh, Ken's
I,
question, excuse me.
yeah, I think that it never dawned on me because, oh yeah, the answer is 100% yes. You know, and I think it's funny because even as we see in the toasts that people give at the end, regardless of how people feel about Maurice, I think they're able to separate the event from the host
Mhm.
in cases where maybe they don't agree with him. I loved how well Ron and Maurice worked together. I mean, he one again. Maurice says he makes a point of saying that Ron's lifestyle is repugnant, but he thinks Maurice's opinion. But throughout the whole episode, they work so well together. Maurice can put aside his feelings toward Ron and knows that he is absolutely the best person to employ to get this ambiance. He says, you people are born to ambiance, in order to get everything looking just right. If he wants this party to be the best party, Ron is his person, and he doesn't care anything else than just getting the right person there. And Ron loves being chosen, or maybe just loves the challenge, or just loves doing this anyway. He probably never even thought to say no to Maurice when Maurice asked him. And there's something about this big feast that pulls everyone together, no matter how they feel. And what a wonderful payoff it must have been. I can just imagine when they were, when Pauline was saying, previous feasts, 100, Maine lobsters, and that was just the fish course. And just imagine what all kinds of food they were able to have. Probably food that I'll never, I can just imagine myself ever being able to try.
Yeah, that's yeah. I love your point about Ron, because he certainly wasn't still without abusive statements from Maurice. Uh, try to act normal. Maurice still gets his digs in, but end result is what Maurice is about, and he does respect, if that's the right word, he does respect people's knowledge and expertise in areas. Jacob.
Oh, yes, I would want to go to the party too. I think it would be, yeah, an incredible experience to share in with the community. And I think you're right, separating the host from the event. And it does remind me a little bit, one of the questions I think you had asked, Ken, also was, without naming any names, have we ever known someone like Maurice? And I have been to some events before with a family member um, who had some qualities like Maurice. They could put on an incredible party, and we would have lots of fun. But there were definitely some aspects of it that where that um, person's kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, their rigid expectations for what should be in the party almost superseding the experience of the guests a little bit. I mean, this doesn't necessarily play out in Maurice's feast, but one could imagine a scenario where, if the guests weren't behaving just a certain way when this course is served, or using this fork, or like the kind of social etiquette with which one navigates a gathering. This person in my family would kind of give negative feedback if people weren't observing it. If they used the wrong fork, or if they did this or that. And so some of the family would kind of, at times be a little passive aggressive, like, well, gee, little comments here, they're like saying that they were displeased with being called out. And that's kind of it. Once again, it doesn't happen this episode with Maurice, but it's that thing about how much can you separate the event from the host? Like, can you still enjoy it, even if you feel like the host is over the top, or if they're being unreasonable? And I think for me, I would still want to go for sure. And I guess I'm kind of wondering too about Barney's question about Maurice's own self-understanding as it relates to other people. Do you want to read that quote, Barney, or should is that all right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's another good episode. Democracy in America is the title, and Holling has been the mayor forever, and someone finally wants to run against him, and this woman, her name is Edna. She is just chatting with Maurice, and she says, "What about you? Why haven't you ever run for office?" And Maurice says, "Truth of the matter is, people don't like me." He says, "Oh, they respect me. Some even fear me, but they don't like me." And I think that in that episode, probably we could think, "Oh yeah, sure, that's right, yeah, that's sure." But I don't know, because I think we've seen a lot of episodes where people are nice to him, and people enjoy. Maybe they like when he's around. They like what he has to say, but then there's also episodes where I think we talked about the one where he fired Chris, and the whole town has the meeting, and they're like, "We're sick of show tunes. We're sick of Pork and Bess. We're sick of your dumb voice."
Mhm.
So I don't know, but I think maybe I don't know if he could get elected. But I think maybe I don't know, in my opinion, maybe he's being too hard on himself. Even if he hadn't thrown this party, I think we've seen enough kind of genuine times um, where people enjoy that he's there, enjoy that he's around, and probably don't think of him so much as like lording things over people, but are glad that he's there in the community with them.
Yeah, Edge certainly throughout the series shows affection to him, not only by virtue of being employed, but he could have been employed and fit the part of the quote you brought forth, Barney, about fearing and respecting. But we always felt that Ed had a genuine affection for him, and right back at him for Maurice as well. And you're right, Maurice has had some moments. One of our favorite episodes that we discussed, Soulmates, when he finally looks at his former lover from Korea and genuinely looks at her and says, "How are you?" We get Maurice as a feeling human being there. This might be a segue into the toasts because we're you know Maurice also by saying they might respect me, they might even fear me, but they don't like me. Then we have the toast from Ron and Chris, classic moments.
Oh, boy, Chris just gives Chris starts us off with the toast. And what kind of personality? Boy, that is just delivered just beautifully the way he delivers
Scathing.
that toast. And you know, just happy and it feels heartfelt. And he puts in that interesting line, you're the top 5% in terms of income, but yet consuming 25% of the world's resources. And then
You
he
are
says,
America.
He's like,
you are,
did he say you're a
yes,
true capatalist or something like that? Or
yes,
Progress,
yes, yes.
progress with no
Progress
conscience.
without with no conscience. Paving everything in
Amen.
sight. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Oh.
Yeah. He really gets that perfect line, you are America. I think that the writers really, really within maybe the one thing that they wanted to comment throughout this whole episode, as beautiful as the episode is put on and as amazing as everything is, and we can easily get caught up in just the I mean, the lighting is great. Oh wow, everything looks
Mhm.
great. Everyone looks great. It's just amazing. And then they sneak, even though it was delivered perfectly, they sneak in that one comment that I think they want us to kind of reflect on a little bit. You are America. Whoa, you know, wait a minute. That actually does kind of refocus the picture here a little bit for me. But that toast, and you've got impeccable taste in booze. He says.
Yeah, the comedic relief. And then Ron
I know.
as direct as Chris as well. Maurice, you're a homophobe and a bigot, but you won't stab anyone in the back. You'll take that knife, plunge it into your chest, give it a twist. Man.
it's
Oh.
it's interesting, the quote that you shared, Barney, about people not liking him but respecting him. It's almost as if they're both saying you're consistent in your behavior. I mean, even I guess if the behavior is flawed, at least you're consistent and you have integrity within your own worldview. You're not maniacal or like you're not pretending and hypocritical. You're consistent in it. So, and he kind of appreciates that, even though subtly their digs or judgments about. He appreciates that they recognize his um, consistency, I guess, or integrity of how he lives out his life, even if they disagree with some of the decisions. And I guess I'm kind of wondering, you had asked the question, Barney, about pride, Maurice's pride playing a role in this episode, and you had asked in your question about what are the positive and the negative sides of pride. Like I think maybe the positive side is Maurice, I guess, what is it? Is he's able to take delight in, enjoyment in other people and the event. But I guess the negative side is, um, that it also is this double-edged sword that prevents him from really fully hearing the other people. Like, he can appreciate the toasts, but he's also not fully learning and changing, from the flaws that are mentioned in the toasts. So it's his pride also shields him from being able to learn from or grow. I mean, maybe that's too harsh, because like in the soulmates episode, he does grow and he does learn and change a little bit. And maybe it's trying the toasts are hinting at, you have a small little capacity within yourself to have a little space to grow and learn. I don't know. How do you all respond to that?
I think you're spot on, Jacob, from my viewpoint in watching this program. Um, I guess Maurice, there's pride in doing it. He didn't have to do this. He could have done other things. He could have flown himself to wherever and celebrated with um, whatever he perceives as his friends out in the world who are equally or um, maybe not surpass his accomplishments of wealth and being an astronaut and all of those things. But um, so that side of pride, okay, but
Yeah, that's a great point that you bring up, Ken, that yeah, he could have celebrated it any other way he wanted to. He could have taken out a big huge ad in some newspaper and say, "Hey, look at K-Bear, the 25th anniversary or whatever it was." He could have pointed much more to himself in other ways. And I forget which character it was who says, this is just like Maurice being like, being a testament to Maurice or something like that. But um yeah, the fact that he decided to share this and with the community, and like Jacob says, that he um kind of is taking pride in being in his success, but um wanting people to enjoy, be able to enjoy the fruits of his labor in a way, probably like Ruth Ann was saying, to kind of remind people that, in a way, remind people that he still is the richest man in Sicily, um, and he still is able to do all these things and still, as he also said in the Democracy in America episode, he likes to pull strings. He says he sees himself as pulling strings in the background, but yeah, he could have done this any other way. He didn't have to invite people. He didn't have to spend, as he said, spend top dollar for, this and that. And I looked up he said, I loved when Ron said, about the K-Bear cake, um, and he said, what was it, like pulled piping or whatever it was, doesn't come cheap. And, Marie said it was, he spent 10 grand on that cake. And I looked it up, and $10,000 in 1992 is about $22,000 in
Wow.
this, in 2023. So he spared no expense, just to, because we know that he's a gourmet. We know that he enjoys these things, and he wants to let other people enjoy them with him. And it's kind of like maybe he's finding a reason to show everyone, yeah, hey, this is awesome, but also to let people enjoy things with him too. And um thinking about the kind of mentioning about the toasts again, Ron and sorry, yeah, Ron and Chris, if they didn't respect Maurice, I don't think they could have given those toasts. So they respected him enough, they respected him to be able to be honest with him, and also to actually toast him, because they mentioned his good points. Like you said, the consistency. He'll never stab you in the back. He's a straight shooter. you know, um, and you might not like what he has to say to you, but at least he'll say it. he'll say it to you, like that. And
I was wondering when I first saw it, I was wondering if then Adam would get up and do one. That would have
uh,
been that would have been more entertainment, certainly, because uh, Adam's Adam. So yeah, it would have been.
What a
But they
character
could
he
only do
was.
so
This
much.
this whole
Oh,
episode, he was
oh
just
yeah,
so over the top, with his
yeah.
antics about perfection in the kitchen and, lecturing all the other chefs. And then he kind of really has it out for the one French chef, and he just can't abide by the things that guy's made. And of course, that French chef made a fish that made Marilyn sick. And so
mm,
he like obviously protests. And then what does Maurice fire the chef? Then you're fired,
mhm.
you're fired, Frenchie, or something. I forget what he said.
Frenchie, I know. Yeah. Frenchie, you're fired. Yeah, I think it was. I think that was the line.
Oh, but
Oh yeah.
it's
And
like Adam, he's like losing it. And like when he first comes in, he's like really going after this French chef. And then he says, "What does that smell?" And then he realizes they're making this certain type of what is it? Something with the marrow of so many
yeah.
cattle. It's like 50 cows. And he's like, "Oh, bring me my knives." Like it's like regardless of how upset I am right now, I need to fix this like recipe. He's really a perfectionist. So anyway, when you bring up Adam, this episode, his character looms so large over everything with the food prep. It's really something.
Yeah, I like we really see his passion. We really see that he really loves cooking, and like he says, he doesn't want to why do we cook? And the one woman said, because you're hungry. And he said, wait, say that again. And he's like, yeah, that's right. But he doesn't want to eat anything that they made. He wants to eat what he makes. And so we also see pride, maybe it's justified in both characters, in Maurice and Adam. But we see Adam very, very full of pride for what he can do in the kitchen. And but then I like how we see Eve bring him back down to earth. When he fixes the fish, he makes some souffle out of it, and then she says she tries to hint, check on the baby, and then he doesn't take the hint, and she says, instead of standing around sponging comments, could you
Compliments.
compliments, yeah, compliments, yeah, could you please check on the baby? And then she kind of knocks him down a step in that way. But
Well, that was a great point too. Like, because it shows a little bit of the edginess. She's like, well, of Eve, because she's like, well, if you don't want to check on our baby, that's fine. But when there's sudden infant death syndrome, and you come back to me, and I'll say, okay, you were just standing around sponging compliments. Like she really gets him, and she's his match for sure. Maybe even more
Yeah.
so, and I love that they're Adam and Eve. And it's funny, Joel mentions earlier in the episode, did you name your child Cain or Abel or something, or something like that? Did you remember when she's like, no, I forget what she named. Do you remember what she named her son? It was like
Aldrich.
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 Yes, it's a family name. The Charleston Aldriches, I think, or something like that. Yeah.
Expect the unexpected on this program at times. Just
Aldrich.
Aldrich.
Yeah. Uh,
Uh,
well, are there any other parts of the episode that either of you want to talk about or things to bring up before we close our time?
yeah, that was quite enjoyable. I enjoyed listening particularly. I always do, but particularly to you two today to unfold some things that kind of float around the back of your mind and then an insight. So thank you.
Thank you both too, because I feel the same way for you, Ken, and you, Barney, like being avid enthusiasts of the show who have seen so many episodes. You have this huge context for each character of like their whole story arc. So it's really neat to have you bring in other references and as we're like thinking through this latest episode. So thank you both for that.
Yeah, and I too wholeheartedly agree that discussing the episode together really helps to flesh things out that however many times we've seen the episode, we didn't catch before. But how great it is, again, going back to one of Ed's comments from Ed's lines from the first episode that we talked about, how it's always, and then how Ken adapted it to our situation, how it's always better to watch things together or talk about. It's always more fun when you're watching something together or talking about something together. And we hope that you feel the same way, that it's also always more fun listening to us talk about these episodes together. And we are always honored to have you watch along and listen along with us during each and every episode. And we hope that you, as we, are looking forward to what's coming up next. And so for Jacob and Ken, I am Barney, and this has been another episode of the Two World Podcast. Thank you very much.